Okay, great. So, good evening, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. So, let's just jump right into it. We have a lot to cover today. So, at the beginning of the session, we begin in the usual way, adjusting our motivation. So, please adjust your motivation, thinking that the purpose of my life is to benefit all sentient beings. And in order to do that in the most effective way, I must first achieve the state of complete enlightenment, characterized by the full development of all good qualities, as well as the complete abandonment of all faults of the mind. Then and only then will I have the skills and qualities to lead all sentient beings from the oceans of samsaric suffering to the state of liberation and enlightenment as effectively as possible. And therefore, I need to learn about all the various practices that lead to the state of enlightenment. And therefore, I'm going to engage in this lecture here today. Okay. And Mary Ellen, if you could enable participant screen sharing. Okay.
Sorry about
Then
that.
no problem. Then we'll continue with, can you see this? The refuge and bodhicitta verses that we do at the beginning of the teaching session. Here we'll do in English first, twice, and then if I remember, we can do Tibetan for the third. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. O Sangye Chedon Sogi Chonan La Janchu Badu Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chenyengi Be Sunam Ki Jola Penche Sangye Jupar Sho. Oops. All right. And now continuing on with the main body. So as I mentioned in the last class, we have three, well, let's see, but I think we have three more sessions to go in terms of lectures. And I was saying that each of these are going to cover one of the so-called three principles of the path. So now in this class, we're going to focus in on the mind of the renunciation, or this wish to generate, to attain liberation for oneself alone. So where we are in the overall scope of the Lamrim outlines, then you'll remember these, the sequence in which the disciples are to be taught actual instructions. So we have the stimulus to take the essence from our optimal rebirth, right? That was the teachings on the precious human rebirth or optimal human rebirth, and then how to extract the essence. Then this has three outlines as well. We have training your mind in the stages of the path shared with the small scope, training your mind in the stages of the path shared with the medium scope, and training the mind in the great scope stages of the path. So last week, we covered in a bit of detail what this means, stages of the path shared with. So we talking about the difference between, shared paths and who shares it and what makes it a shared path and so forth. And then in the context of the small scope, we also went over those teachings and practices of those stages of the path shared with small scope. So if you remember, those are impermanence and death, and then karma, and especially the suffering of the lower realms, and then the teachings on karma and the three jewels of refuge. And then especially we were had also talked about how these three levels of person are distinguished by their goals and the methods to attain them. So the small capacity or the small scope, they're trying to get a good rebirth in the next life by abandoning the causes of lower rebirths, non-virtue. So now here, when we talk about a person of the medium capacity, right? So in brief, their goal is liberation from all of samsaric existence. And how do they do that? Well, they do that by abandoning its causes, karma, and the afflictions. And then in next class, we're going to go through the person of great capacity. But just to preview that, then their goal is the full enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. How do they do that? By practicing with the mind of bodhicitta. Okay. So now, since we're going to go into the practices of a person of medium capacity, actually in preparation of last week's session, when we were talking about these three scopes and the shared paths and so forth, I came across a text by one of the great Tibetan masters, Ngawang Pelden, which actually had the definitions of these three types of person, right? And so here, the person of a medium capacity. Medium capacity is a person posited from the point of view of one who, having become disgusted with all of samsaric existence, makes their goal to attain their own liberation from that, and thus engages in the method to attain it, the three higher trainings, right? And so of course, the Indian source text for these three types of person is, Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. And there in it, Atisha mentions in a more brief way, those persons are called medium who stop sinful actions, turn their backs on the joy of cyclic existence, and diligently strive for their own peace. So you can see the main elements there in Atisha's definition. Ngawang Pelden also then puts in his definition, right? So turn their backs on the joys of cyclic existence. Then Ngawang Pelden says, oops, yikes. Having become disgusted with all of cyclic samsaric existence. So actually in the Tibetan, it's Shenpa Lokpa. And in one of my dictionaries, a Tibetan English dictionary, it actually says, to become nauseated. So, but you will also see that disenchanted. We'll see that in another slide. I think that's another Tibetan word, yi kyowa. But anyway, the point is, every time when we try to expand our viewpoint and get these higher, more encompassing, larger goals, right? Which means to increase from these different levels of capacity, we have to, look at and compare the two, the lower goal and the higher goal. So, just as we did in the small scope, we compared getting reborn in the lower realms with the alternative, getting rebirth in the higher realm, okay? And we saw the relative disadvantages of the lower rebirths and the relative advantages of the higher rebirths. And so we aspire for the higher rebirths. Now we're going to become disgusted with all of samsaric existence. So not just the lower rebirths, but any rebirth that is taken under the power of karma and afflictions, right, should be seen with a mind of disgust, so that we turn our backs on even the joys within cyclic existence, the joys of cyclic existence being, to enjoy a, good rebirth like a human or a deva, or even all of the, wealth, fame, power, all these things. nice sensory experiences and so forth, you know, they're okay relative to their, you know, alternatives within samsara. But you see here, well, the alternative to samsaric existence is this mind of, this attainment of liberation, where we don't have to experience any of these, right? And therefore, reflecting on the faults of samsaric existence, then to then attain, or sorry, make a goal to attain liberation from that means samsara. And then how do we gain liberation from samsara? Well, it's to abandon the causes of samsara, the karma and afflictions. And so engaging in this method of the 3 higher trainings, we mentioned these briefly before, but the training in higher training in ethical discipline, higher training in concentration, and higher training in wisdom. I'm saying this training in wisdom means the wisdom realizing the ultimate nature of all phenomena. And since the root of samsara is the ignorant mind that grasps onto this distorted view of reality, you know, the actual antidote to samsara is the wisdom realizing ultimate reality. Okay, so that's the definition of a person of medium capacity. Oops, hold on. Yeah, okay. And so now, how do they actually train their mind? So then, these are the root outlines from the Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, from the section of training the mind in the stages of the path, shared with a medium scope. So first is, you know, that developing thoughts of yearning for liberation. Okay, so when we look back, okay, remember they have two things they have to do. They first become disgusted with all of samsaric existence, and then 2, make their goal to attain, you know, liberation from that, and thus engaging in the method to attain it, right? So with this first point, becoming disgusted with all of samsaric existence, then, you know, this is this first point, developing thoughts of yearning for liberation. And here, then we have thinking about the general sufferings of samsara, and then thinking about samsara's specific sufferings. And then later, ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation, thinking about the source of suffering, the entry to samsara, and then actually ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation. Okay. Now, so these are the outlines from Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. Those of you who have studied the Lamrim Chenmo before, right, then you'll know, actually, before Tsongkhapa in his presentation goes into thinking about these sufferings of samsara, there's another outline. And in that, it's an outline identifying the mind yearning for liberation. Okay, so this is important. So I thought to add it here, right? So, you know, before we set a goal, right, we all say, I want liberation. We should be very clear, you know, what that means, right? So liberation, it means, in general, it means freedom from bondage, right? And here, since we're talking about liberation from samsara, what binds us to cyclic existence is karma and the afflictions, okay? So the type of liberation we want, right, is the freedom from rebirth impelled by karma and the afflictions. So that is liberation. And then the desire to obtain that freedom is the mind intent on liberation. Okay, so here, just so you get a little bonus Tibetan lesson, right? So mind intent on liberation, tarpa dunyer gilo. Okay, so here in the Lamrim Chenmo, that translation committee for tarpa dunyer gilo, they have chosen mind yearning for liberation. Okay, these ones, thoughts of yearning for liberation what is used in the liberation in the palm of your hand is the same. Tarpa dunya gilo. Okay. So either way, it's, pretty similar, right? But just so you know, this can be one thing that's confusing, right? When you start to read different commentaries translated by different translators who have different kind of word choice, just to know that, oh, these actually is the same word being translated from the Tibetan. Okay. All right. So now, why we need to then develop this Tapa Dunya Gilo, or this mind yearning for liberation. So this is important also to understand why, because very soon we're going to be meditating on all these kinds of suffering, right? So why do we go through all this, right? Why does the Buddha sort of burst our bubble? So here in one of Tsongkhapa's other short Lamrim prayers, the three principal aspects of the path, he writes, without the complete intention definitely to be free from circling, there is no way to pacify attachment seeking pleasurable effects in the ocean of circling. Also, by craving for cyclic existence, embodied beings are continuously bound. Therefore, at the very beginning, seek renunciation. Okay. So here, again, there's a lot to unpack. So just a few things, right? When we go through this, then you see circling. Okay, korwa is the word for samsara, right? But korwa, korlo is a wheel. And so korlo is a wheel, and then kor, right, by itself, maybe some of you know kora, right? I'm doing kora, means circumambulation, okay? I'm just flowing out with all the free Tibetan lessons today, okay? So kora, right, you might hear, I'm gonna do kora, it means doing a circumambulation. So this core, it has this, a very strong connotation of, a wheel or a circle or, going around, right? So in one way, okay, samsara, right, it's this kind of cycle of rebirth. Sometimes you'll hear it like that. So here, when they've translated it, right, korwa, they've taken a very literal translation, circling. But yeah, it means samsara, okay? And then, the ocean of circling, sometimes you'll see the ocean of samsara, right? So anyway, that's just one thing to know. Okay, so here the point is, without the complete intention definitely to be free from circling, okay? And so this, again, you might hear this come up also. The word that's usually translated as renunciation, okay, ne jung. I think we mentioned this before, ne jung, right? So ne means definite, jung means to emerge, okay? So the ne jung, sometimes you'll see it translated again in a very literal way as the mind, of definite emergence. But what that means is, to think, okay, definitely I have to emerge from samsara. Okay. So, this stanza is showing the reason to develop the mind yearning for liberation, so that intention definitely to be free from circling is this mind yearning for liberation, right? Okay. So without that, then there is no way to pacify attachment, seeking pleasurable effects in the ocean of circling. Okay. So now, to tie this into the overall scope of the Lamrim, right? So who is this one who is referred to in the second line here? Who is the one who has attachment seeking pleasurable effects in the ocean of circling? Those are the practitioners of the small scope. Okay, right? So remember, we have this graduated stages of training, right? The graduated path to enlightenment. So the initial stages, we are, trying to seek the pleasurable effects, meaning we seek a good rebirth, but those good rebirths are still within samsara. They still are within the ocean of circling. Okay, so until we have this mind that wishes to be, totally free of all of samsara, then we're still going to be, at best, a small scope practitioner, and our motivations will only, extend to seeking these pleasurable effects within the ocean of circling. Okay, so what's wrong with that? Well, by craving for cyclic existence, that means even for, craving a good rebirth, merely desiring for or aspiring for a good rebirth within cyclic existence, then, well, embodied beings are continuously bound. So this is, still binding us within samsara, right? As long as we have this craving for anything within cyclic existence. So therefore, at the very beginning, seek renunciation. Okay. All right. So here, then, again, just some more quotations that's good to understand. So Aryadeva, he says, "How can one who is not disenchanted with this world appreciate peace? Cyclic existence, like home, is difficult to leave behind," right? And then in the verse summary of the Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 lines, so I think we mentioned, right, the Perfection of Wisdom, okay, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, the Prajnaparamita Sutras, there are, different versions of that, right? So they normally talk about the 6 mothers and the 17 children, right? So there are these like 23 Prajnaparamita Sutras, and within those, then the Prajnaparamita in 8,000 lines, is one of them. And actually, this verse summary, I think, was composed by Atisha. I think so. Okay. So I'm kind of cutting off the Buddha's head. Okay. Okay. Anyway. All right. So this quotation is one of my very favorites. This is in the Lamrim Chenmo as well. So although we have sunk into the midst of cyclic existence, an ocean of suffering with neither bottom nor shore, we are not disenchanted. We have no fear. We are pleased and excited. What is going on in our mind? Although we have entered a fire constantly blazing with problems, poverty, hardship in acquiring food and shelter, effort in keeping, and finally loss, as well as separation, illness, and aging, we boast of happiness. This seems insane. Okay. So you'll see as well, like in the Guru Puja, the Lama Chopa, there's this stanza, like having given up the mind that sees all of samsaric existence as a pleasure grove, please bless me to generate the mind that wishes for liberation, right? So Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when you hear him teach about the faults of samsara, he'll bring up this quotation from the Lama Chupa, the Guru Puja, written by Pension Losang Chigi Gyaltsen, again and again. So within the presentation of, well, in the Lamrim Chenmo and many other presentations of Lamrim, then there's this question that comes up about the significance of the Buddha teaching the Four Noble Truths in the order that he did, right? So the Buddha taught first the truth of suffering, then the truth of the cause of suffering. So normally when we, as we know, first comes the cause, then comes the result, in sequential order, right? Temporally speaking. But here the Buddha reverses, the chronological order of how those the Four Noble Truths arise. And then, there's this big debate. Well, Tsongkhapa, he gives a few pages to it about, what the significance is, why the Buddha taught in this order. And basically, the point was, since we, right, childish beings as we are, we are the ones who are so attached to these pleasurable effects within cyclic existence, right? And we are like these insane ones, right? We boast of happiness, right? We think that, okay, there might be some suffering, but our sort of identification, our diagnosis of how deep our suffering is going is very superficial, right? We see, okay, maybe I should say me, right? But, we think that whatever kind of problems we have, then it's like, okay, poverty, that's a problem. Well, that will just be solved if I, get more money. Illness, okay, that will be solved by, getting medicine or vaccinated. All these things. Okay, I'm lonely. Okay, that will be solved by getting a friend, a partner. Whatever it is, the scope to which we consider our suffering is very superficial, right? Or actually, later we'll come to see that all these other problems that we have, it's because we're in samsara. We've taken a rebirth due to karma and afflictions, and therefore we experience all these things. Okay. So anyway, until we, accurately diagnose the very root of our problem, then, it's like, to use another medical analogy, it's like treating the symptoms, but not the underlying, source of the disease, right? So therefore, we then need to, combat this thought that views samsara as like a pleasure grove. In other words, to think that we're going to find any real, true, lasting peace, happiness, satisfaction within samsara, within cyclic existence. Okay. So now here, then we have these contemplations. If we have a distorted view that sees something as being so, wonderful, amazing, pure, then if that's not the case, we have to then consider a more realistic view. We have to consider the drawbacks. We have to, consider the drawbacks of something, so we have a more balanced view. And also considering the drawbacks of something will be an antidote to our attachment for it, right? So within this context, then there are these presentations of the various kinds of suffering within samsara. So this is the meditation of the suffering, 6 types of suffering. And here, these are the wording, the terminology that's used in liberation in the palm of your hand. So there, the bane, the bane of uncertainty. So, it's really interesting. In my experience, I don't know the rest of you, but the only time I hear bane, right? We say the bane of my existence, right? Like that's the only time you hear bane, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm not reading the right kinds of books. Anyway, but in other Lamrim presentations, you'll see a more kind of traditional translation of that, the suffering of uncertainty. And so anyway, suffering, dungyal or dukkha, dungyal in Tibetan, dukkha in Sanskrit or Pali, then has a bigger sort of meaning than just suffering. When we normally think about suffering, we think about very gross kinds of physical suffering, right? Like illness and broken bones, physical pain, these kinds of things. But here later, we're going to see that even our pleasant experiences within samsara, like the pleasant experience of eating nice food or listening to nice music, so forth, those are still dukkha. They're still dungyal. They're still in the nature of suffering. So because of that, sometimes I'd like to say that it might be better to consider this as a kind of unsatisfactory, right? Or could be better, problematic, something like this. So it encompasses more than just kind of physical or mental pain, right? So anyway, when we then discuss these the 6 types of suffering, we have these. So the bane of uncertainty. So here, what that means is this is highly tied into impermanence, right? And in particular, what we reflect on here is that all of these things that we normally conceive as being sources of our happiness or satisfaction, then they're not stable, they're not permanent in nature, they're constantly changing. And therefore, any happiness or satisfaction we derive from them will also be unstable and changing. The story you'll see in most presentations of Lamrim in this outline is this story of Shariputra, who was one of the main disciples of the Buddha, and he goes out walking one day and sees a family, and let's see, what was it? There's man and woman sitting at the table. There's a kid there. There's a dog under the table. They're eating a fish, right? And Shariputra, through his power of clairvoyance, sees that, in their last life, oh man, I forget what it was, but the fish was the husband in the last life, and anyway, these relationships had kind of changed, right? And the dog is someone from the last life. And anyway, he starts laughing because he sees that just in the past life, they had been oh man, I'm sorry, let me try to find this because it's a nice little story. Yeah, and of course I can't right now. Anyway, the main point is like that. Just in the past life, who's now the husband was like the dog, or the fish. And anyway, all these relationships changed very quickly. And I think it was the husband from the last life is now the fish that they're eating, something like this. Anyway, and then Shariputra just kind of sees this and then laughs because he sees this as just such a joke that those people that we were so attached to in the last life and so happy to be with, we couldn't live without, we now within a few years now they're the dog under our table that we're kicking, or are the one we think we could never harm, for some karmic reasons, then in a few years we could be eating them for dinner, right? So anyway, this is the point that is being made. So in any case, with all of these various types of suffering, then we read what's there in the text, but the real thing is to then reflect on this and relate it to your own life. So here, unless you have the power of clairvoyance that can see, these things about, what kind of relationship, you had with the dog you're petting today, then even without that, you can consider in your own life, how, think about the friends, maybe the lovers that you've had, the failed romantic relationships, and how, again, you thought, oh, I can't live without you. And then, within a few, whatever, months, maybe weeks, maybe a few dates, then, you're never speaking to each other again. And yeah, what else? Those jobs we had that, later we got laid off, the places, that, we lived, we thought, okay, I'm gonna, make this my home. And then, later we find ourselves in another geographical areas, right? So all these things, uncertainty. Yeah, I think we can find many examples. And so this is what we try to do then when we were talking about the wisdom arising from contemplation. So contemplate, okay, yeah, is this true? How does this apply to my own life? Where do I see this operating in my own life? Okay. So yeah. Then next, the bane of being dissatisfied. So what this means then is, well, even though we might get something, it's never enough. So when we think, the usual example is when we think about accumulating wealth, then we're in debt, and that's suffering. And so we think, okay, I got to get out of my whatever student debt or credit card debt. And so we work hard, we eat ramen noodles for dinner, and then we finally get out of debt with great sacrifice. And then we're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, but now I need to save up to buy a car. And we do that. Okay, and I bought a car. I want to buy a house. Okay, now I want a bigger house. Okay, now I want a beach house. Whatever. So this never being satisfied means we keep striving after things, and even when we get them, okay, most of the time we don't get them, by the way, but even when we do get them, it's sort of never enough. So that's the bane of being dissatisfied. Then the bane of repeatedly leaving bodies. This means to die. And then this is quite tied up with the next one, the bane of being conceived and born over and over again. So this is something important, right? As long as we're not free from the causes of samsara, then those two are gonna happen again and again without break. So yeah, until we've abandoned the causes to take rebirth within samsara, then we're going to repeatedly leave our bodies and be conceived and born over and over again. So I think I'll mention now, but one of my very dear friends of mine from Hawaii that I grew up with. So very smart guy. He's also a comedian, actually. But in any case, he's also interested in philosophy. And when we were younger, he had this thought, and when we would discuss, he would be totally on board with all of these sufferings of samsara. And he actually had this thought that no one should have kids anymore. Everyone should just stop having kids, right? Because this thought is, once we're born, right? So this is quite similar to what the Buddha is saying. Once we're born, then we open ourselves up for all these different kinds of suffering, right? So his solution was, if we stop having kids, everyone stop having kids, let the human race die out, then all the suffering, will end. Okay. Well, the point is, and later, in the Buddhist cosmology, or even the scientific worldview, right? One day the sun is going to explode, right? And the earth will no longer exist. And so for sure, the humans on this planet, will not always be there. Sorry for the bleak reminder, but in any case, the point is, there are many different world systems, and as long as sentient beings have karma and afflictions, that is what's going to propel them into taking rebirth. And if not in this world system, then there are countless world systems, as it says in the King of Prayers: limitless at the end of space, thus limitless are sentient beings, thus limitless are karma and afflictions, right? May my aspirations reach be limitless as well. So even if, right, even if my friend gets what he wants, and everyone stops having kids, and the human race dies out on this earth, well, unless they've dealt with and abandoned the causes for rebirth within samsara, then we'll just continue our suffering state in another world. So anyway, yeah, this is what I mean about being able to pinpoint the root of the problem, right? And so even this thought, oh, all of these sufferings I've experienced in this life is because I was born, right? On one level, right? Just like when relationships end, okay. Sometimes people say, oh, I thought they were such a great couple, why'd they break up? Well, if we're really honest, why their relationship end? Because their relationship started, right? So, sorry, right? But, once, and there's a quotation from the Vinaya, that all meetings end in separation, right? So with any relationship, it's either going to, one of you is going to get sick of the other, right? You stop calling each other. Or, and that might happen after 2 weeks, 2 years, 20 years, or even if you found your soulmate and you live the rest of your life together, well, one of you is going to die first. So, it's definitely going to end. So the whole point is, why all of this is happening is because we're in samsara. It's because we've taken this type of body and mind that's under the power of karma and afflictions. Yeah. So anyway, this is why I prefaced all this by talking about the need to meditate on the faults of samsara. And also I just sprinkled that in, that one of the translations is to become nauseated, right? So yeah, if you're feeling some of that, it's okay, it's good. We have to, generate a mind that's an antidote to our kind of excessive attachment and preoccupation with the good things in samsara. Okay, so next we have the bane of moving from high to low again and again. And here, yeah, what that means is, a place in society, people can be rich and famous, and then a scandal happens, and then, they fall into disrepute. And then from life to life, one can be a king, most powerful, most famous, most rich in this life, and then in the next life, can be reborn as a servant or a dog or beggar, outcast, something like this. And then the bane of having no companions. So that means then, well, within the course of this life, yes, we do have friends, but thinking broader term, we're born alone, we die alone, and from life to life, there's no one stable we can count on to sort of always be there for us. So yeah, that's the bane of having no companions. So in the liberation of the palm of your hand, we have these 6 types of suffering. And then in the Lamrim Chenmo, you also see these different presentations of the 8 types of suffering and the 3 types of suffering. And so we're going to have a whole module on samsara and nirvana later, but just to mention these now, these 8 types of suffering, the suffering of birth, old age, sickness, and death, then the suffering of encountering what is unpleasant, okay, everything we complain about, and then separating from what is pleasant, then not getting what you want, and then this last one, the suffering of the 5 appropriate aggregates. So Lamazopa Rinpoche, okay, so just tell a story. I'm not bragging, okay? I'm not name dropping either. But many of you know Rinpoche has been giving these teachings from the beginning of the COVID pandemic, right? And so I remember last time I shared this one where Rinpoche was talking about the 4 types of unknowing, okay? Right. So anyway, these teachings are online, and then the Venerable Joan and some others help with making a transcript. And sometimes when there is a Tibetan phrase, or sometimes you quote a passage, sometimes I'm asked to then find that passage, or get the Tibetan so that they can sort of translate in a better way, or give the whole passage for people to know. So the one that's going to come out, I think, next, Rinpoche actually has been talking about these different types of suffering. And this is your sneak preview. But in that, he was saying that, okay, in the Pabonga Rinpoche's Liberation of the Palm of Your Hand, he talks about the 6 types of suffering. But within the Lamrim Chenmo, this presentation of the 8 types of suffering, and especially this last one, the suffering of the 5 appropriate aggregates, that's actually the most important one to understand. And so then I thought to explain this a little bit, right? So here, right, the suffering of the 5 appropriate aggregates. So again, aggregates, or skanda in Sanskrit, or pungpo in Tibetan. You'll hear this come up again and again. So in general, what is referred to by aggregates are just the psychophysical constituents of a person. So normally they talk about the 5 aggregates. There's the form aggregate, feeling aggregate, discrimination aggregate, what they call compositional factors aggregate. But karma is the most important of the compositional factors, okay, for our purposes. And then the consciousness aggregate, okay? So constituents, right? We mean the kind of parts upon which a person is sort of, labeled, right? Because the person is, merely labeled, okay? So the aggregates are just those kind of parts of the person. So in a kind of rough way, you can think of it as the body and mind, okay? The aggregates are the body and mind. Now, when we talk about appropriated, okay, appropriate kind of means like, to take, really, right? So nye len gi pumpo, len means to take. So they're appropriated in the sense they're taken on by persons born in samsara through karma and afflictions. Okay, so we take on these aggregates because we've been born in samsara. Okay, so that's what what it means, appropriated aggregates. So now, why are they suffering? Then here is talked about in 5 further outlines. So the vessels for future suffering, right? The vessels for suffering based on what presently exists. Okay, so basically these 5 appropriated aggregates, they are, another word you'll see is contaminated. So we have, they were caused by previous karma and afflictions. We haven't abandoned the afflictions now, okay? So since we have not abandoned the afflictions, we are creating more causes for future suffering. We're creating more karma. And every time we sort of, have an affliction arise in our continuum and we don't apply an antidote, that affliction itself will get stronger. And so in this case, every moment that goes on, most of the time when we're accumulating karma, then we're just creating causes for future suffering. Okay, and then suffering based on what presently exists. So this is what I was saying. We've taken on this body, and since we have this body, because we have a body, we can get sick. Because we have teeth, we can have a toothache, right? Because we have a stomach, we can get hungry, and so forth, right? So all of these sufferings that we experience in this life, it's because we've taken on these contaminated, appropriated aggregates. Okay, and so then we have the also thinking about these as being the vessels for the suffering of pain, right? So why do we experience pain? Because we have a body that can experience pain. Why do we experience the suffering of change? Because we have this kind of, body and mind that experiences suffering of change. And then the vessels for suffering of conditionality, this is exactly what we're talking about, right? The suffering of conditionality, so hold on. Oh yeah. Okay, so these last 3 here, right? Then you also see this 3 types of suffering. So suffering of pain, you'll see it, suffering of change, and the suffering of conditionality, or sometimes you hear it as all-pervasive compounded suffering. So all-pervasive, right? Pervasive means, going everywhere, all-pervasive. That means in any of these 6 states within samsara, right? Remember, we have the 3 lower rebirths, the hell beings, hungry ghosts, and animals, and then the 3 higher rebirths, humans, asuras and suras, or we can say maybe demigods and gods, small g gods, right? Then all of those types of beings, they are born due to karma and afflictions, okay? And therefore, they are subject to experiencing these various kinds of suffering. Hmm? Now, it is said that there's some states of existence in the, well, not to bog you down too much in the cosmology, but in the formless realm, okay, there are these certain types of beings that don't take a gross physical body like we have, right? But they remain in a very subtle kind of mental body and abide in samadhi, or a very blissful state of concentration. Sorry, actually, that state of concentration is neutral. It's like a very deep sleep. So it is said that beings in the formless realm, they have actually neither the suffering of pain nor the suffering of change. It's like they're in a deep slumber, or it's almost like they're in a coma, right? Very kind of blank kind of existence. Well, they still have all-pervasive compounded suffering, because they haven't abandoned the causes for future rebirth. When the kind of karmic force behind that concentration wears out, and that could take a very, very, very long time, but it eventually will run out, and then they'll get reborn again in one of the other states, and probably in one of the lower states. So anyway, the fundamental suffering, right, is this last one, the suffering of conditionality. And gaining a wish to be free from this is the unique feature of Buddhist practitioners. So Rinpoche, he also was going to talk about how Rinpoche talks about how His Holiness the Dalai Lama talks about how even animals can have a mind of renunciation towards suffering of pain, right? So animals can recognize the suffering of pain. They don't want to be hit with a stick. And therefore, if you hold a stick in a menacing way, the dog will kind of yelp, put the tail between the legs, and run away, right? And then there are, we talked about the suffering of change and how the attainment of these absorptions, samadhi, in the formless realm, they're free of the suffering of change. So there are non-Buddhist practitioners that see even, so suffering of change means contaminated pleasant experiences, right? So they'll notice that, hey, yeah, when I eat something nice, I get some pleasure, but that's actually not that great after all, because it doesn't last long. Then when I eat, too much, I have this kind of bloated feeling afterwards, all these kinds of things, right? So these pleasant sensory experiences, even trying to go after them, there's a lot of effort involved, and that kind of craving creates a bit of mental sort of agitation, right? So some practitioners, they say, okay, I don't want all this. I want to meditate. I'll be in this kind of, neutral, deep sleep state, very peaceful, right? And in having that kind of motivation, wishing to be free from the suffering of change, then they attain these higher states of concentration. And so that is there even within non-Buddhists. But this last one, why is it a unique feature of Buddhist practitioners? Well, it's because to really understand the suffering of conditionality, one needs to understand the causes of samsara, being karma and afflictions, and to know the mechanism, how our karma and afflictions propel this cycle of rebirth. And then, furthermore, to see how this misapprehension about how ourselves and other phenomena exist is the root of the afflictions. And, due to that, so that's the root cause of samsara. That is a unique sort of feature of the Buddhist practitioners, because it's a unique teaching of the Buddha to teach the selflessness, or anatman, right? You understand? Okay, thank you. All right. So anyway, there are the different types of, 6 types of suffering, 8 types of suffering, 3 types of suffering, then how then do we know when we actually have this mind of renunciation? So this is another quotation from the 3 principles of the path. So there, Tsongkhapa says, when having trained in that way, there is no arising even for a second of attraction to the perfections of cyclic existence. And all day and night, the intention seeking liberation arises, then the thought of renunciation has been generated. Okay. So that is kind of high bar to set, right? Not even for a second to be attracted to these perfections of cyclic existence. And then, this thought, right, arising day and night, they call it the kind of chuma mayimba. So chuva means kind of fabricated, So when we, like at the beginning of our sessions, I try to walk you through a bit of a motivation, thinking about benefiting others, and therefore, we need to attain enlightenment. So basically, that's a brief way to generate bodhicitta, right? Thinking about this wish to benefit others, and then thinking about, the wish to achieve enlightenment. But we do it in a kind of fabricated way. We do it like induced by, thinking in a certain way. And then at the end, it's like, okay, yeah, we kind of muster some semblance of that mind, right? But here, when we gain more familiarity with any of these sort of minds, then since we're creatures of habit, it'll get stronger. It'll arise more easily. And then at a certain point, it will, arise effortlessly, spontaneously, and, day and night. So we can have this, mind of renunciation in an uncontrived, spontaneous manner. We can have this mind of bodhicitta in a uncontrived, spontaneous manner. And that's how we know that, we really have it. Okay. So, wow, that was pretty good. I usually am like way over time, but I planned for an hour for this, and we've just about hit it. So now we have an hour left, and I wanted to do the meditation on renunciation. But before we meditate, then it's always good to sort of clear away doubts we have on the points to meditate. Because if we just sit down and try to meditate, then our doubts can come up. And we've been having these kind of, breakout rooms. So why don't we do that? Let's do it like this. We will have a breakout room for what, 10, 15 minutes? In that, I want you to discuss any doubts you might have. So things that often come up, I don't know, why is Buddhism so pessimistic? Why are they hitting me on the head with all this kind of renunciation and, suffering talk, So that could be there. If you have questions about these various types of suffering, you can also discuss that within yourselves, within your groups. So, yeah, it's a little bit up to you. Then what we'll do, after 15 minutes, we'll come back, and any lingering doubts that you might have, we'll discuss as a group. I did receive a couple questions via email, and I'm not sure if we talk about that before the meditation or after. Let's see about that. So anyway, 15 minutes, I'll stop talking. All right. So anyone want to start us off?
What do you want us to share?
What you guys talked about. If you have, yeah, whatever you want to share.
Matt,
If there's outstanding questions, if there's something that you found was quite insightful that now you're thinking about things in a different way, it's up to you.
I can share mine because I thought for sure there was no way it was going to get answered. So my concern or issue was that I felt like we're being taught to not crave or desire or pursue anything, and yet the teaching is saying pursue enlightenment and liberation in the next life. So therefore we're craving liberation, just like we crave other things. But the way the answer is that really it's about helping other people and helping other people attain freedom from samsara and enlightenment. And the only way to do that is to improve yourself and get rid of samsara and improve, your next life. And that builds the skills and the capabilities. And this is the way on the path that helps you do that. So I like my analogy is we landed on is you got to put the oxygen mask on the plane yourself before you can put it on someone else. So
Yes, that's very good. Very good analogy as well. Yeah, and just to respond a little bit, but I'm going to do this briefly because I want more of you to contribute. Yeah, it is true. Like desire gets a bad rap, right? So there's in some contexts, it's like we're supposed to abandon desire, but actually, all desires are not created equal. So it's not that we have to abandon all desire, right? Because some desires, as we mentioned, the desire to benefit sentient beings, the desire to gain liberation, the desire to gain enlightenment, um, even compassion or love is a type of desire for others to be free from suffering, for others to have happiness. Those are all good desires that we try to cultivate on the path. But when we say, desire needs to be abandoned, what particular kinds of desires we're talking about is, desire to like the 8 worldly concerns, these kind of lower desires, the desire for, just my happiness, myself alone, right? So these kind of smaller, limited type of desires, we try to gradually, transcend and have a broader and more encompassing desire that aspires to more. Okay, anyway. So next, thank you for the contribution there. If we don't have a volunteer, I'm going to volunteer you. Okay, Ciara. When I said volunteer, I saw her eyebrows get a little bit worried, which immediately gets my attention and it wins you the prize.
Yay.
What did you guys talk about? Now you'll turn off your videos.
We were just really giving our different ideas on, as far as renunciation and death and specific feelings involving that. And that trying to grasp a little bit of where everyone is at and the different levels of study and understanding that we all encounter. So yeah, well, I mean, it was pretty in depth. The other 2 people I were in the room with had a few more thoughts about it. I mean, they would be better to explain it to you for sure. But I guess the trouble I am personally having, it's not really a trouble or anything. It's just trying to remember everything and keep it all in order and do a steady practice. That's pretty much where I'm at right now. But I'm also not trying to put a lot of pressure on myself as far as, you have to do this or you have to do this. It's really going to come to me when it comes to me. So
Yeah, that's, this is a balance we all have to take, trying to, aspire to make progress, but not be too, tight about it. So for now, yeah, if you can get into just a kind of routine about it, that you do some bit of study every day. And then even when you don't have the books in front of you, one thing that helps you remember is trying to remember, right? So, in the middle of the day, it's not in your study time, but you're like, okay, what were those 6 types of suffering again? Okay, suffering of uncertainty, suffering of dissatisfaction. Okay, third one, then you go look. Oh, suffering of having to leave the body again and again. Okay, I got that one. Then what was number 4? Taking rebirth again and again. 5, and then, when you have that, oh, what was number 5 again? And your mind is like, right? That's really good for your memory. Okay. So then even if you don't get it and you have to look in the text, falling from high to low, next time you're going to remember it better. And then, last one, no companions. Okay, fine. That took 1 minute. So then you go on with your day. It doesn't take a long period of time. So you don't have to pour over your books, 2 hours at a time. You go on with your day. Then later, your afternoon tea. Okay, what were those 6 types of suffering again? Then you do it again. Then if you get it for that day, you can go through all 6. Then, forget about it and wait till tomorrow. Okay. And then see. And then gradually you can integrate these things. It's called spaced repetition learning. So
thank you so much. Thank you.
I've been doing a lot of learning. I have exams coming up in about 8 days, 10 days. I'm not exactly sure actually. So instead of studying the actual material I'm responsible for, I've been researching how to study more effectively. So anyway, okay. So next, so Mary, actually, you had a quite nice point, and why don't you just share that with everyone?
Well, my concern was that, having to give up, as far as renunciation, like food or your cat or, the pleasant things that you experience in samsara. So, and I guess the kind of wind up that I got led to was that you can still have these things in your life, but your goal, or you should be focused on, spending time trying to better yourself so that you can, retain liberation if you're in the middle scope, and then hopefully to change to become enlightened in the higher scope.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah.
Yeah, it just made me think of something that I was sharing in the little group, but about attachment, Mary. Like there's this really quick phrase that I'll say in my head: Anitta, dukkha, anicca. And it's impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, or dukkha, suffering, and then selflessness. And so, just like this, what kind of repetition was this? Like intermittent something repetition?
Space learning repetition?
Wow,
Yes.
nice. Okay, yeah. I apparently don't have any of that going on. But yeah, but similarly, just kind of saying that, like when you pet your cat, do you have a cat?
Yes.
Okay. So like just saying to yourself, when I pet my cat next, the first pet, I'm going to say Anita, Dukkha, Anika. And I'm just going to think impermanence in the nature of suffering and selfless. And that's kind of like, it helps me with things I'm attached to. And it doesn't make me love things any less, but their nature is more apparent. Does that fly with anyone here in the class? Like, it's just like little tricks. Does that make sense? Never mind.
Very good, very good. And you know, just on this point, the other thing that's good to keep in mind is what this mind of renunciation is, right? So I think in some of the readings, it was coming out that it's not like getting rid of those things out there, right? Or like, for example, if we are presented and there's a nice meal in front of us, we taste it. Oh, this is delicious. Oh, I can't have delicious food. And like we pour vinegar or, you know, I don't know, burn our food. It's not like we're like, you know, torturing ourselves or things like this. But, you know, we need renunciation of samsara, right? Samsara is what we're renouncing. And since samsara is this, you know, process of uncontrolled rebirth due to our karma and afflictions, the real thing we need to renounce are the afflictions themselves, okay? Now, that said, right? So when we think in that way, then the problem isn't even the eight worldly concerns aren't the problem, but it's our mind of attachment. It's the way our mind relates to those things that's the problem, right? Yeah. So when we then think in this way, see, for us, the problem is, since we have too much, you see, this is the point. We have to become disenchanted, right? So now we're enchanted. It's like we're under the spell of these samsaric pleasures, right? And therefore, to kind of break the spell, we need to bring ourselves down back to reality by meditating on the false of samsara and you know, seeing it in a more realistic way. Yeah, but to be honest, for us, I was sharing this example with the group. You know, I myself, I consider myself a bit of a foodie, right? And like this week I'm cooking, and I just notice, like, I'll go online and I will research recipes, right? And so I spend like an hour researching recipes, and then when I cook, it's you know, like a multiple hour affair. And so for one meal, it's like I spend 3 hours making a meal. And okay, in the larger scheme of things, that 3 hours, I don't know, could I be doing something better with the time? I could do 1,000 prostrations. I could probably, you know, memorize a few stanzas that would help me on next week's exam or whatever it is, right? There's so many things we can do with our time. And so for now, see, the problem isn't with the samsaric pleasures, but the problem is they're very time consuming. Okay. They take up a lot of time that we could be using, you know, towards our goals of liberation and enlightenment. So anyway, that's something to also consider. Now, mind you, I'm cooking for the Sangha, right? So it is like, I keep that in mind. I'm offering service to the Sangha. Anyway, so this again, you know, depending on our motivation, we can make these things, you know, dharma, right? Anyway, okay, I'll shut up. Anything else? So we have to get into the meditation. So let us do that. Well, You know what? It's actually 9:08. So sorry. Since I was very nicely given some questions, I did want to address that person's question. Otherwise, I might not get questions in the future. So if I show that I take your questions seriously and I answer them, that might give a good impetus for more questions to be asked. What do you think? So this will be pretty quick. Okay, so I had a couple questions. So one was resolving an apparent contradiction. So this person, they wrote in and said, isn't it a contradiction that Buddhism teaches us not to be attached to anything, and yet wants us to be dedicated and attached to increasing karma and work toward improving our next rebirth? Why shouldn't one simply be focused on helping all sentient beings and reducing the samsara? It seems trying to control whatever happens in the next life as being attached to helping oneself. Shouldn't we do what is best we can in this life, and whatever happens after happens with a motivation to improve our rebirth? Doesn't that make all the work one does self-serving? So actually, this just came up. So maybe this has kind of been answered already. But here, okay, one thing we should keep in mind is the big picture, right? And remember, the root outlines about showing the greatness of the teachings. The first one is the greatness of the Lamrim, recognizing that all the teachings is being non-contradictory. So one in this question, okay, isn't there a contradiction between these two, these different things? So actually the Lamrim should be teaching us, should be showing us how these aren't contradictory, okay, in general. So now how does the Lamrim do that? So here again, we have to keep in mind this goal of trying to attain a good human rebirth. That is the attitude of a person of small capacity, right? So they're, the persons are least who are the ones who diligently strive to attain the joys of psychic existence by any means for the welfare alone. So let's give a little bit worldly example, right? People in general, they're very short-term thinking, okay? And they're very selfish. Okay, so if you've ever tried to have a 7-8-year-old eat their vegetables at dinner, okay, is that an easy task? No. So I know I'm not a parent myself, but I know many parents. What do they say? No dessert until you eat your vegetables, right? Okay. So, or maybe the students, the kids, okay, no video games until after you finish your homework, right? All right. So later with study, okay, later. So first you have to kind of bribe, right? Oh, after you finish your homework, then you can play your video games. Okay, giving a extrinsic, external reward. Okay, then later maybe, okay, son, daughter, study well so you can get into a good college. Okay, and then even later, okay, even after they're done with college, you should just maintain a lifelong kind of love for learning. Always be reading, always bettering yourself, always increasing, your knowledge and skills and ability. This is advice that Warren Buffett gives to people, right? He famously reads for, 4 or 5 hours a day, right? So you can see kind of different levels of motivation, right? From a small one, you can have dessert after you eat your vegetables. You can play video games after you do your homework, to a larger love for learning in and of itself. So the Buddha is doing the same kind of skillful means, same kind of psychological methods that successful parents are also employing these days, right? So here when we see these three goals, and we say this different goals, in other words, the people of different capacities, they need different things that motivate them. So for some, the motivation of a good rebirth will inspire them. But of course, that's not the end all be all. We still have the goals of the person of medium and greater capacity to go through. So anyway, hope that then answers that question, right? Thinking about these people of different capacities, different things then will motivate them. But the smaller, more limited motivations, we have to graduate on to larger ones as we traverse along the path. Then question 2. Then there's a question about these different uses of the word essence. Sorry, I'm speaking a little bit quickly because I want to meditate too. Then there's this, from the foundation of all good qualities, wondering about the definition of a word. So there's this essence, right? We learned about a clear light mind in the first module. I don't recall us discussing essence. In foundation of all qualities, it reads, please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly day and night takes essence. Googling this, I found mind essence has all of these 3 qualities. The essence of this mind essence that is empty. The nature of this mind essence is that cognizant, and the capacity of this mind essence is unconfined. Okay, so now this is important. General thing. We're going to find terms used, the same word in different contexts means a different thing. So all the time when we come across a word, yes, what is the context? What does it mean in this particular context? So here, from the foundation of all good qualities, this was the stanza on the precious human rebirth. Understand the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is greatly meaningful, it's difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly day and night takes its essence. So what is its? Its is, the precious human rebirth, right? So although in other cases we have, the essence of the mind, right? Even the Heart Sutra, right? Hridaya is essence. So Rinpoche likes to translate that as the essence of wisdom, okay? But so this word essence has different connotations and different qualities, but in the context of the precious human rebirth, what does essence mean there? And here we get a clue from the root outlines. Remember, these sequence in which the disciples are to be taught the actual instructions. So the very outline of the precious human rebirth is the stimulus to take the essence, same word, from the optimal human rebirth, and then how to extract the essence from your optimal human rebirth, then is training your mind in any of these 3 scopes. Okay, so here essence means when we boil down something to its essence, right? So then when we're talking about how we extract the essence, means how we can do something that's going to have long lasting effects than more than just this life. That's what we're doing in the Lamrim, right? And so in general, doing any of these 3 types of training will have effects that extend longer than this life. But then it also says, in the context of the us would-be Mahayana practitioners, then the real essence is to train the mind in bodhicitta. But then seeing that training our mind in the stages of the path shared with the lower 2 scopes, we see those all as practices along the way to generating bodhicitta and the practice of the great scope. So therefore, any of the kind of Lamrim practices then enable us to take the essence. Okay, so I did have another example about how the word freedom is used in different contexts, but let us not do that, and instead let us meditate. Okay. So now at the beginning of a meditation, we get into a comfortable position. Most important thing is to sit up straight. And if you are on a couch or a chair, it's good to kind of come off the back of the couch. So you're not leaning back, but rather are supporting your own weight with your own effort. And then we take a few deep breaths at the beginning, especially emphasizing the out breath. really dispelling all the stale air and getting into a mindset of relaxation, but yet focused relaxation. So we do that by focusing on the sensations in our body as we breathe in and out. So really feeling how those breaths manifest in the body as physical sensations. So we can feel the rising and falling of the abdomen, maybe the expansion and contraction of the chest. Maybe we can feel the air passing over the skin in the nostril area. And now that we've developed a bit of calm and clarity in our minds, then we can continue with the actual body of the meditation. So here we're going to meditate on the 6 types of suffering. So the presentation that is there in the liberation of the palm of your hand. So the 6 types of suffering are the fault of uncertainty, insatiability, casting off bodies repeatedly, repeated rebirth, repeatedly descending from high to low, and then the fault of having no companions. So actually within these 6, it is said that the first 2 are the most important, the fault of the uncertainty and insatiability. So now contemplate bringing this to your own life, to your own experience, this concept of uncertainty. So the traditional example about the various relationships we have changing constantly, friends becoming enemies, strangers becoming friends, and so forth. All of this is constantly in flux. Then the other things that we consider to be, stable sources of our happiness, our well-being, things that sustain our life, like our jobs. Also, we can get laid off, we can switch jobs. We could be in good health one day, and then all of a sudden we get we meet with an accident. We get some kind of illness. So try to make it real, thinking about those sources that you once derived a certain level of satisfaction, happiness from, that you no longer have. Somehow it changed, somehow it's uncertain. And then when you come to that conclusion that, oh yes, within samsara, these things that I rely on for my happiness, comfort, security, they are uncertain in nature. And then when you reach that conclusion, just let your mind sink into that. Put a pause on your analysis and just let the truth of that really hit and affect your mind. And so now we can switch to the next contemplation, that of the fault of insatiability or never being satisfied. So now you can think of specific examples in your own life when you strived hard to achieve something or acquire something that you thought would bring happiness, and then after you acquired it, this discovery it wasn't enough actually. So whether it was some professional accomplishment, or even just the fact that after a few hours of eating a delicious meal, then we're hungry again and need to eat again. And then everything in between. Try to identify these instances of insatiability or not being satisfied. And then again, when you arrive at the conclusion that these things within samsara that I experience are never enough, they're never totally satisfying, then let your mind sink into that experience. So now thinking that both of these, the uncertain and never satisfying nature that we experience, is because we are bound in samsara. We have this kind of body and mind that is affected by our afflictive emotions, our afflictions, and our karma. That's why everything we experience is unsatisfying ultimately. That's why things are constantly uncertain, changing. And therefore, we develop the mind wanting to be free from this unending cycle of rebirth due to our karma and afflictions. So then try to generate this mind aspiring to be free from samsara by being free of its causes, the karma and delusions. And then when you generate that aspiration, hold your mind in that. Okay, so gently come out of the meditation. And we'll do just a brief dedication now at the end. By whatever virtue I've collected, may whatever virtue I've collected benefit the teachings and all transmigratory beings, and especially may it cause the essence of perfect pure Losang Drakpa's teachings to shine forever. Okay, so thank you very much. I was also wanting to end on time, so there we go. We will send out an email very soon about readings for next week, but as you know, next week we're going to cover bodhicitta. So I imagine in those texts that you've been reading, it's just going to be whatever pages regarding bodhicitta. Okay. All right, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Much.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Mary Ellen.
See you next week.
Thank you. Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.